Hello, and welcome to Broker Than You. I am your host, the best podcast host in the universe, Steve Cully. I would like to thank our sponsors at Procyon Partners. Procyon, they specialize in employee benefits, wealth management, and retirement planning. President Sean Rabinowitz is a proud supporter of our podcast network, and we're thrilled to have him. Green Street Trust International, owned and operated by Renell Jump. They offer a variety of services, but they specialize in tax plans for businesses large and small. They will save you money or get you a big fat return. To schedule your free strategic tax planning session today, go to www.greenstreettrust.com. Pete Finch and the Finch Law Firm is out of Bridgeport, Connecticut. Pete has been doing this for 8 years. If you have suffered any type of personal injury, a slip and fall, a car accident, your mother-in-law ran you over with her car, your wife stabbed you, the Finch firm is for you. Pete has won legal battles all over the state of Connecticut. He is not afraid of any insurance companies. He will go to war to get every dollar you deserve in compensation. So you always have to remember, in a pinch, call Finch. You can go to his website. It's just thefinchfirm.com and get a free consultation. Dynamic Human Performance is owned and operated by UConn legendary running back Andre Dixon. He trains boys and girls of all ages, of all sports, and he just started a new boot camp program every day, 6 a.m. You want to get in shape? You go work with Andre. He has an athletic development program where he takes you, boys and girls of all ages, you select a sport, and he trains you, develops you from the ground up in that sport to maximize your potential and be the best that you can possibly be. Andre has sent boys and girls to college on scholarship of all sports. So if you want to work with the best, you're in Hartford, Connecticut. He has a 5,000 square foot state-of-the-art facility. Go to www.dynamichumanperformance.com and you can work with Andre. Down south, we have Julius Williams and the Trench Mob. They work with offensive and defensive linemen in Decatur, Georgia. And let me tell you, if you want to talk about the best of the best, Julius has some of the most talented offensive and defensive linemen I've ever seen. They compete in tournaments all over the country, 5 versus 5, offensive versus defensive linemen. There's rounds, they're timed, and there's a point system. Julius's team went undefeated this past year in 5v5 tournaments and finished second in the nation. Julius is currently angry and appealing this decision. He does not agree with it. He believes they should be ranked number 1. Unfortunately, there is no appeals process, so he's just going to be barking into the air. However, they are on the college camp circuit, and for the record, every camp that they've attended, someone from the Trench Mob has been offered a full scholarship to a university. So that right there tells you the quality of the program. And Julius also put together a program for kids out of state. He will go with you. He will be with you every step of the way through training exercises, drill work, to better your technique, and he will get you to where you need to be. He has sent kids to Florida, Florida State, Miami, Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama, just to name a few. So if you want to work with the best, Julius Williams and the Trench Mob is the best. Go to www.battleofthetrenches.com. And finally, we have a brand new sponsor, Luther James Insurance. Luther James Insurance out of Edgewood, New Jersey, which is Bergen County, owned and operated by James Whitfield. James Whitfield just came aboard. For 3 years, he's dedicated himself to the art of financial planning, advanced insurance planning, mainly life insurance, and retirement plan strategies. He helps out law enforcement achieve financial stability. His journey in the industry is more than a career, it's a passion. He helps with dealing with the financial pressures of retirement because fear of the unknown is real. So to contact James and Luther James Insurance, all you have to do is go to his website. It's http:// LutherJamesInsurance.com. And again, we'd like to thank James for coming aboard. And then we have the man himself with us, fresh Nedvonne Young, back again. We got a ton of feedback from his last appearance, and he was kind enough on short notice to join us again, and we appreciate it. Welcome, Nedvonne.
Hey, man. Thanks for having me again, Steve. I'll try to do, if I could do it, I'll do it for you, bro. So,
no, I know you will. Nobody has a better reputation than you, and you always give back, and you do good work. So we had quite a few people comment on your portfolio and diversifying your portfolio because you're involved in, several different things, business, real estate, and whatnot. And a lot of people asked, who taught you that? I mean, I know your mother is a huge influence on you, but the diversity of the portfolio, because some people just said that they were taught, stay in your lane, be an expert, stay in one lane, focus on that. You have managed to have success going outside the lanes in several different industries. And more importantly, I mean, you're taking chances and betting on yourself. So several people asked about that. Where did you get the idea to really diversify and get involved in different industries?
That's a good question, Steve. I would say
well, I didn't ask it, so that's why it's good.
I wouldn't say there's not one central source, because the different industries and things I looked into.
You did your due diligence.
Yeah, so I definitely did my due diligence, and in the process, I kind of found, if you will, like mentors of people that I've met.
Yep.
People that I've actually met and have not met, like people that I admired, and I kind of followed their stories or their systems on how to do things. So, believe it or not, when it came to multifamily, my first introduction to multifamily real estate was from a gentleman who still has a program, Dave Lindahl. So Dave Lindahl was my first introduction to multifamily. So
was it someone you knew, or was it someone that you followed on?
I followed Dave. So Dave had a like home study course on multifamily real estate, and he he had basically like what now I would understand. He had a model, like he had an Excel model that was kind of it had pre-population of things to how to how to analyze deals. And then so I learned how to identify deals, analyze deals, and source deals and where to get funding from, things like that. So that was my introduction to multifamily. But even before multifamily, just investing in real estate, I would say the initial one was I think I mentioned before, was my mom, who started.
Yes.
Just like, I don't even know if she 100% knew what she was doing, but she just was, she at one point, she's had opportunities to get into things, things didn't necessarily work her way, but she had opportunities. And those were always things that stuck out to me, how she had the wherewithal to think about, purchasing, acquiring properties when we were in Florida, like near like Universal. These are things that did come to fruition for, some personal reasons I won't mention, but just kind of stuff didn't work out on family wise, and she kind of got screwed. But she just had the wherewithal to own, and she's
really?
Yeah, she's had the wherewithal to own, and it was just something that she just, she was always like a go-getter, and she's very optimistic. So I think I get that from my mom. I'm super optimistic about things.
Yeah.
And I would say something you mentioned earlier, like I'm a risk taker. Like,
yes,
I'm going to take risks, and just understanding and think certain things, messages that were given when I was young, very starting in the game, was that like you're young. And it was like, even if you're in your 40s, hey, Labe.
There he is.
What's up? Sorry.
No, it was my fault. I got the time wrong. I was so excited that I had to jump on at 10. I'm sorry.
So even if you it's like when you're young, it's like even if you're in your 40s, you're still relatively young, and you have some runway to make mistakes. So I was never afraid to go ahead and jump out there and try my hand at things, because if I failed, right, it wasn't really a failure. It was more of a lesson. I would learn, and then I can, but I had time to recover. So it was always like you have time to recover, especially when you're young. So
exactly.
in my 20s, 30s, as what I understand now is building my portfolio, of my diverse portfolio, which I wasn't really thinking about. I just was like, all right, first it was, I want to get some property. I can get them via short sale. And that was the start. And then it was like, okay, then now I know like the graduation was multifamily. And then from there it was like, okay, then it was starting to understand commercial real estate. Like just understanding different things was just like that gave me a lens to view things from. And it came from a number of different people. Like I said, but my introduction to on the real estate side was Dave Lindahl. And then on the multifamily side, rather, was Dave Lindahl. And then, and then just other people who've had success that I followed, and I took lessons. And then, believe it or not, one of my biggest, I'm starting to find out now, one of my biggest inspirations and biggest things that I didn't realize this was happening, but started to see it over time was the word, the Bible. So Bible principles tell you a lot about wealth building and how to how to generate wealth, how to position yourself to be wealthy and to get there, which is like, to be the lender, not the borrower. Like just these Bible principles will guide you and direct you. Like pretty much won't lead you wrong if, just being a good human being in general, but actually on the wealth side. Like a lot of people focus more on just like, just being a good human being or not doing certain things. But I mean, it is amazing guide. Like I follow a gentleman by the name of Myron Golden. Like he's a mentor that I never met, right? But that's like I plan on meeting him one day. But he uses, I mean, he will he can show you how to generate wealth staying in Genesis. He won't even have to leave Genesis, and which is amazing to me, and it's just something that's like blew my mind. And even going back to when I look at, and it's funny, these mentors that I had, like another mentor that I never met, which was he's Tony Robbins' mentor, right? You find out Tony Robbins, right? And then Tony Robbins' mentor is forget his name. Why is his name just escaping my mind right now? But skinny guy, but it'll come to me. But his mentor, Bible principles. It was
Really?
he followed Bible principles, and then it was just like getting gentleman I found out Myron Golden Bible principles, and then and that's the way that I do business and interact with people, Bible principles. So I would say if I really had to sum it up, one major source, it was really Bible principles that kind of led me to do these things this way, and then it hasn't steered me wrong, and I just I built the different things and started and still building, right? Like I'm a
You're just
work in
getting
progress.
started.
Yeah, I'm a work in progress, and that's been, I would say, Bible principles that and mentors that kind of subscribe to those principles. That's what I was saying.
And Laban, you're fairly religious too. Would you say that there's some crossover between religion and your work?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think for all of it's interesting because what Fresh is talking about, I've always, the Proverbs, Genesis. And I'm a little, I'm Old Testament, named Laban, who was a conniver, the father of Leah and Rachel to Jacob. So anytime they know the Genesis and the name Laban, I said, yeah, my parents named me after a conniver. No idea how that's helping me in sales. But no, I'm a big Proverbs guy. And, in the Proverbs, it tells you to seek advisors. And I think that for me, in my quest for real estate investing, because, that due diligence period, which ends up being a good number of years, is a huge factor. And so I went and sought people who I knew were investing in real estate and what I wanted to invest in. And then I just took it with a grain of salt, an open mind. And you can kind of tell from quote advisors who has, and we talked a little bit about this last time, like, don't just tell me what you think I should do. Show me what you've done. What have you learned along the way? What are some hurdles that I can avoid? And so I think so often people make recommendations, and I know we talked about this the last time too, where it's like, okay, but what is your experience in that field? Like, are you just hearsay telling me what you've heard, or have you actually been boots on the ground doing this? So I think, obviously seeking advisors, but seek advisors that actually know what it is you want to pursue and accomplish. And hopefully they've already done that and it's not just talk. So yeah, I think, everything we do should follow a biblical, background, if you will, just because there are so many principles in there for you to live a better life. And I think a lot of that, and this is true with money, like you have to put in the wood before you get the fire, right? And so many people want to make the money, but they don't want to put in the work to make that money. And I think the biggest thing with real estate investment is it's a long-term game for most people that have done it the right way. Now, and in the last 5-10 years, people have been flipping property, which is okay. But, a lot of flipping property is speculating on what it might sell for in the very near future. And the way we've always invested, more long-term buy and hold, you have to take into consideration the appreciation of a property. And yes, we've seen it quite rapid appreciation in the last 2 years, but for the most part, real estate is a long game. And what I have found in life, and again, I mean, the Bible talks about delaying gratification. And I think in today's society, it is so hard to delay gratification, especially when you look at young employees. Like, they want their paycheck at the end of the week. It's like if you tell them it's every 2 weeks and then Uncle Sam's going to take a little bit out, it changes your whole perspective. And so the other thing about real estate investing are those tax benefits everything from depreciation, to all the factors, again, the appreciation in value, the depreciation you get to write off on the tax side. But again, to me, if you stick to the fundamentals and biblical principles to guide your business decisions and your personal decisions, you're going to do a pretty good job and most likely be successful. But again, I think people get that backwards, where they think in order to be successful, they got to make a bunch of money real quick. And I think that's where, even for me, selling some of our properties, because we've delayed
liquidating, right?
Yeah, but and that's because we've recognized the market and the time that we're in here, the seasonality. And I will say, it's interesting. We've talked about the market shifting and changing a little bit. And for the first time in probably, 5 or 6 years, I had a seller that accepted an offer contingent on the sale of another house. Really? Honestly, yeah. And in the last 5 years, if you even tried to make an offer contingent on the sale of your house, it wouldn't even be considered. But that shows me that, the seller is, we've only been on the market 2 or 3 weeks, but it was our first offer. Your first offer is typically your best offer. That doesn't mean you accept the offer they made, but that likely is the one you're going to negotiate with to try to get them over the finish line. The good thing about a contingency to sell a house is that buyer is truly motivated now to get their home sold so that they can close on this next one. What it does in a seller's perspective, though, is it creates a domino effect where, and this guy's just selling, it's not like he's selling to go buy something, but we're now hinged on the buyer's successful sale of their home, sale and settlement. So it's one of those things where it's not something we've seen in the last 5-6 years, but it's something that shows me as a professional, this market is starting to shift. Whether you price the home a little too high, the market will speak to you when you put it on the market, right? I mean, it's like if you get multiple offers, not just showings, and this is the difference, right? When I list property, the seller didn't hire me to show the home or to have the home shown. They hired me to get it sold. So even though we might have had 14 showings in the first, 5 or 6 days, until we get something in writing, I don't have anything to work with. And in this particular case, I had a couple different agents reach out to me with verbal offers. And here's the other thing, and I don't know if Fresh touched on it. Man, when you're making deals, and it kind of goes back to these NIL deals with some of these kids, you can't work off hearsay. Like, I need it in writing. So when I had this agent calling me and saying, hey, would your seller take, X amount? It's like, I have no idea. I have to present it to the seller.
Put it on paper.
But put it on paper, because it's like, as soon as she gave me the number, it's like, okay, well, are there any contingencies? Are they financing any of it? Is it a cash deal? Like, there are so many factors to a real estate transaction. And then I go back to, this is a great line for somebody that says, well, can we just make a verbal offer? And it's like, okay, it's 10:30 in the morning. And if I asked you and said, hey, would you want a piece of cake? I don't know, maybe not. But if I set a piece of cake down with a fork and a glass of milk, are you going to take a bite? More likely than not. So, like, put it in writing, give me something to chew on. And I don't know how this agent goes around making verbal offers, because, and again, she never put it in writing. So now it's been 10 days of communication with zero activity on her end. So I don't know how people get away with just verbal offers, because they don't work at all. You have to have it in writing. And that's true if you're hiring a contractor to do some work, get it in writing. And if they're not willing to put it in writing, be very suspicious. So, I think that was off on a tangent, but yes, biblical principles are good. The market in our area is beginning to shift. It's still a seller's market, but buyers, I think, have been in this seller's market so long that you're not twisting their arm to come up in price anymore, because, again, we're starting to see more inventory, but because prices rose so quickly, a home is worth what a buyer is willing to pay. And the buyers are the one that dictate how this market goes right now.
And Laban, you have also spoken quite a bit about that Robert Kiyosaki guy.
Yeah.
You look to him quite a bit. Can you explain a little bit about his history?
Oh yeah, I mean Robert Kiyosaki, who wrote the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, that so many
Oh,
investors
that okay. He
have
wrote that
started
one.
with. He did, and what's interesting is that he actually wrote that book to promote the board game that he created, which is called Cash Flow 101. That's the game I play at one of our sales meeting every quarter. I've done that for over the last decade, and I've had agents say that they contribute their willingness to invest in real estate because they played that game and got a better understanding of, the economies and the ways to generate revenue. And so Robert Kiyosaki, I'm a big fan of his. And, principally, he's been doing it for decades and it works. Now, the other end of that spectrum is Dave Ramsey, who I also listen to. And there was a really good song. Somebody spoofed a song about Dave Ramsey and his frugality. And it is interesting because even Dave Ramsey makes his money in real estate and now in book sales and everything else. But it is interesting. He preaches cash only, credit doesn't matter, don't use credit cards. And so I like I said, with any advisor, take it with a grain of salt, know your market, know what you want to do and what fits into your principles, because I know Dave Ramsey is biblically based, whereas Kiyosaki not as much. But in the real estate investment side, I mean, I would listen to Kiyosaki all day over Dave Ramsey, just because Kiyosaki's really in it and doing it the way most people invest in real estate. So careful who you take advice from, but at the same time, especially on a local level, it's good to find somebody that has done it, that owns real estate, that has made a different, a plethora of deals in the realm of whether it's single family, multi-units, the commercial side. It is good to have a diverse portfolio in that regard, because one of the things we're seeing is the residential market, as it starts to change, so too does the commercial market.
You said that, yeah.
And I think that's where commercial is always interesting to kind of monitor that and watch that. But even on the price per square foot, residential is blowing the doors off of price per square foot on commercial real estate right now. And I think that, there's a number of reasons for that. Remote work is probably a number one, which has decreased the demand for commercial real estate. But I'm most interested in all of the commercial real estate that exists that sits vacant right now.
Right.
That we really need to rethink how some commercial real estate is moving forward. And we've said this before, especially in areas that don't have a lot of room to grow horizontally. You need to start thinking vertically. And by that, I mean, you might have a grocery store on the first level, but then you might want to consider building condominiums above that grocery store if it's in a convenient location. It doesn't change the footprint of the building, and if that entails stormwater management or some other factors. And so I think, and Erie still has some room to grow, but for some reason, developers don't always think to go vertical. And I think that's kind of what the future is going to entail. And they've been doing it all over the country, where you have that mixed use, space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to your point, I think so. It's a lot to touch on. One is what you're saying, the mixed use. So mixed use is definitely the way to go. Me being in New York, growing up in New York, like that is New York in itself, right? You live above a bodega, right? Or there's a bunch of commercial, like, whether there's an accountant here, the insurance agent there, all below on the ground level of an apartment building or a brownstone. Like, so you have those. So mixed use is definitely big. So when he touched on commercial, so understand, and again, I don't want to presume, but it sounds more on the commercial side. You might have been more talking about is probably more on the, like, say, retail, right? So retail. So commercial is broken up, right? You have your multifamily commercial is over 4 units, right? So 5 units plus. Mm-hmm. Then you have your retail, which is your stores, your where anytime you can go somewhere you can kind of purchase merchandise. And then I think what was hit the biggest, hit the hardest has been office, right? So you have office buildings, and office is where that touches on when he mentioned how, you know, you got a lot of people working from home. And then also the model that was back in the, you know, 70s, 80s, and even 90s, early 90s, was the amount of square foot per employee has changed, right? So let's just say if it was 100 square foot an employee, you don't need that anymore. So, and then that's how you have smaller cubicles where you're probably, what is that? I don't know, 10, 15 square feet if you're in a little cubicle.
Yeah.
And then so you don't have all of these offices anymore. One of the things that was big in New
Wow.
York that they did is that they started converting these office buildings into like residential buildings.
Mhm.
And that's all. So if you ever go down to the financial district, if you go down to Wall Street where you see the big bull and all of that, many of those buildings that look like office buildings, a lot of them are residential buildings because they used to be. So all of these, that is definitely a big thing. And I think one of the things that might be happening in your area, Laban, because developers, and like most people, you go with what you know and what you're comfortable with, right? So it takes someone that's ambitious and willing to take a risk to jump out there and try something different. That's against the, you know, might be, you know, that might ruffle little feathers. And then some people don't like what comes with this mixed use stuff. Because, you know, you change now, you have, let's just say when you have all of these homes and now you're going to be building these, call it these mixed use buildings, these apartment complexes. Now you need other things, you need parking. It's going to bring more jobs, going to bring more stuff, but it's going to bring more, for lack of a better term, it's going to bring negative things that some people view as negative things. Some of that may be like pollution, right? Like noise pollution, light pollution. Those are big things that's like in like metropolitan areas that people go, hey, I don't want to, you know, I wanted to be dark at night. I don't want to hear a live band playing in the courtyard at the beer garden. I want to go to sleep, right? So even though that's bringing in young people, new people, money, things that taxes that feed these towns and feed these things. So it's a catch-22. So from a commercial standpoint, is a lot, you know, there's a spectrum of commercial, and then within that, those each little kind of area, a subset of commercial, it has its benefits and its challenges. But a lot of it is needed. But I think with developers, they just have to be willing to pivot and willing to try some things, and they can do little sample sizes, right? I'm pretty sure there's places in your like old shopping centers or somewhere in your area right now that can be redeveloped, and you can see what it would do, right? You can just give it a shot, and you know, and more than likely it's gonna succeed. You have samples from other areas throughout the country and even other areas just in Pennsylvania that are very similar to like Erie, for instance, that have done something similar, and you know, and it works well. So I would say that. And then that's the commercial side, and that's something that I know for me. You know, I have multifamily stuff, right? But don't have a lot of, not the mixed use stuff. That would be more stuff like, that is a goal. Like I want to do some kind of smaller development, because there's what's happening where I am. There's a lot of like land, right? So people are snatching up this land, and then they're starting to develop like either the exit strategy, and that's one of the things I'll touch on in a second. The exit strategy could, when you had talked about on the residential side, it depends on the exit strategy, if it's for sale or for lease, right? So they're buying things either for lease, it's you know, apartments or you know, rental housing, right? I won't necessarily apartments, but then you got the for sale, and then sometimes, and I know this happened in New York as well. They started out initially, it was like condos and things like that, or that was for sale, but the market shifted, right?
Big time.
And the market shifted, which happens. It's a cycle, right?
Right.
There's a cycle, and then that's one of the things I learned from Dave Lindo. He has a 4 market cycles of phases. He calls it like, you have like a buyer's market phase 1, buyer market phase 2, and you can look this up. seller market phase 1 and seller market phase 2. We are always in one of those 4. And we're going, we're and you start to see the trends of us moving into either the 2 seller phases or the 2 buyer phases, right? And those phases kind of should determine your exit strategy. So you always, and Laban may agree, and I'm pretty sure he'll agree with this. You approach real estate or investing in general with the end in mind. You don't go in there because, all right, this is hot. Everybody's talking about NVIDIA. It's like,
you have a plan. Okay, that's what you're saying.
You should have, okay, I am going to, my tax strategy, my stock strategy, if I'm doing stocks, my stock strategy is I am like a buy and hold. I'm just going to hold these stocks.
Yes.
I'm a dividend person. I want to buy dividend stocks that I can see real money right now. That can supplement income, and I can see that, right? So you need to know what you're trying to do before you go in. It's the same thing with real estate. So if you're going into real estate, you should know I want to buy and hold, all right? Or I want to, like when you was talking about the flippers, right? The flippers, people are flipping, and that's fine and dandy when it's advantageous for you,
right?
As an exit strategy. And that should be one tool of many tools in your toolbox, right? But then that might not be the best thing for you at this time. You might need to be a buy and hold. And I think you should at least be aware of the tools and know how to use them. And if you don't know how to use them yourself, you should be able to partner with someone that may be someone who specializes in wholesaling and flipping, right? And then somebody who specializes in buying and holding, who's a multifamily person, so that you can at least get in, right? Because, a part of something is better than all of nothing.
Yeah.
So
let me stop you right there, Fresh. We got quite an audience right now. James Whitfield's on. James, proud to have you as a sponsor. Luther James Insurance, Bergen County. It's 3 years. It's not just a career, it's a passion. Fear of the unknown is real. Nedvonne, Jason, he is just outside of Chapel Hill. Mm-hmm. And he wanted to know, do you look to partner on any of your investment properties, whether it's residential or commercial, or do you prefer to do it by yourself?
I would say almost always I would look to partner. You do, with someone, because it's like, I think Laban mentioned this on the last episode we were on, is it's less you don't shoulder the whole load, right? It's like you want to, and when you're doing that, you want to have people that specialize in something. But let's just say you're not that experienced. You still can bring something to the table, right? You got to be willing to put, as we say in the business, some skin in the game. So, and that skin could be sweat equity. It could be actual equity. You can
talked about that yesterday.
It's different things that you can leverage. You can leverage your credit. You can leverage a number of things. So you got to be willing to bring some to the table. And especially young people, I would encourage is be tenacious and be willing to get your hands dirty, because
be aggressive. Yeah.
Some people, like, at this point, Laban and I, we're more experienced than these younger people, right? We got some things on our belt. We know, we see, sometimes we may see a bit of ourselves in this younger person that's interested and want to come in the industry or want to get it. But we also know, being that young, that you're sometimes your priorities not in order, but we need to see that you are ready, right? The old adage of the teacher will appear when the student is ready. So when they're ready, and they'll show, we will know things that says you're ready. Like, this person's a go-getter. They are not, while everybody else is trying to go hang out and do stuff at the clubs, this person is hitting you with a ton of questions. They're willing to do anything. They're like, hey, can I do? After a while, you want to tell this person up, but you're like, this person is really, I got to find out, right? Then that's how you get in. that's how you get in. You gotta be aggressive.
Yeah. And I think to your point, Fresh, the biggest challenge I find with employees or young people is that, and this is true with a lot of bosses, they're like, well, why you're making me do all the grunt work, right? And so one of the things that I always tell, new people is, listen, I've been doing this 22 years. I'm not above it.
I'm not going to ask you to do something I'm not going to do. Yeah.
Exactly. I'm not above this. I'm beyond it, meaning it still needs done. And I have done this before, so I can walk you through the mistakes you might make and the hurdles you're going to see. But don't make a mistake. Like, if I have to, I will get back and do this again. But the reason I'm hiring you is, again, I'm not above it. I'm beyond it in what I'm doing. And I need people like you willing to be assertive, because so often they feel like, oh, I'm getting pennies on the dollar and boss is making a bunch of money, or boss is sitting in the air-conditioned truck while I'm out here laboring. And it's really hard for new people, new investors to understand that, yeah, you do have to pay that price a little bit, not just more than anything to learn. And I go back to what when I came in, you were talking about, and it's like, you don't win or lose, you win or learn. And if you're not learning from your losses, I mean, man, you're making the biggest mistake ever, because I have made a bunch of mistakes that I've learned from, to where I would never go back down that road. And yet I see young investors start doing those things, going down that road. And again, it's like, you can talk till you're blue in the face, but until they're ready to listen, like Fresh, you said, you know what I mean? Until that student's really ready to listen, and they've probably been beat up a few times doing he's got, he's been doing this 20 years. He doesn't know what he's talking about. But at the same time, once it hits you in the face and you're like, wow, yeah, that was a tough lesson to learn. And then going back to your point, Fresh, on the 4 different stages of marketplace, well, I've always said it's always a good market for somebody, right? Yep. And that's where, when we talk about, us liquidating some of our properties, I'm not selling everything, but I'm looking at the market saying, man, I need to trim some of the fat, if you will, from my portfolio. And I'm picking and choosing because I had a, 50-door portfolio to choose from. I'm not just listing all of them. It's been a 3-year process. And I sat down with my business coach, showed him my portfolio, and just said, hey, this is the biggest headache. This is the, the most questionable municipality that's changing their rules or increasing taxes. And so you sit and evaluate that. Or, we always found that our multi-units typically cash flow better than our single families, but our single families tend to appreciate in value more quickly than our multi-units. And so we've sold a couple of our multi-units because they happen to be in a good area, cash flowing well, and it was time to get out. But we've really been selling a lot of our single families because that's the category that buyers are looking for, the owner occupant. So I'm turning some of what were rentals into owner occupied places that, and in my experience, the owner occupied place takes care of their property a lot better than a tenant or a landlord having to take care of it for the tenant. And so,
you talking about you're doing lease options? Or?
No, I don't do lease options, because most buyers, the reason they ask for lease to own is because they don't really have good credit, or they don't have the down payment. And I don't, it's just not for me. And maybe that's because I'm a licensed real estate broker. And so when somebody wants to get into lease option, a lot of the owner sellers are hoping they fail, right? They don't really want to sell it to them. They want their lease amount, and then they hope they break it at some point so they can get the home back. I mean, in my experience, now that's not always the case, right?
Well, that's unethical.
Well, and I don't think it's unethical. It's just the assumption that because they don't have the money down or don't have the credit to buy, I'm anticipating, because that's the thing. Like, when you carry a note for somebody, or if you're doing a lease option, the option only takes place when the buyer is in a position, creditworthiness, down payment, to actually now close on this. But my point is that I know a lot of sellers that put lease options for a potential buyer, and they know full well after 6 months, 9 months, they're not going to make the payment. And so now they get the home back. And my concern as a seller is that, what's the condition of that home? Because if they stop paying their lease to own, they're probably not paying their gas, they're probably not paying their electric, and it's gonna it's going to reflect on that property. And so, no, I don't do lease options. I've heard many people do them. Some it works for. But for us and the way we evaluate, the different types of markets, seller's market, buyer's market, and kind of those subcategories, if you own property, you can play in that game and win in any market. But if you're just starting out and you don't have a broad portfolio, and so you just want to get your feet wet, it makes it more challenging, especially if, even though you have tenacity, sometimes that tenacity can overrule, due diligence and that gut feeling that, man, I know I want to buy this, but something came up and it just doesn't feel right. Trust your gut, because I've done it before where I remember I had just picked up a new car shortly after we bought a duplex, and there was just something about it where I'm like, oh, this just feels like it's not right. Later that night, I got a call that the 2-unit had a backup on the sewer main and was like a $2,500 repair. And I'm like, oh man, it's a part of the business. But if you take your eye off the ball, something can come creep up and get you, and you got to take care of it. Like, you can't have raw sewage in the basement of a duplex with tenants living there and be like, it'll take care of itself. That is the nasty of all nasties if you're trying to retain good quality tenants. That's the biggest thing as a landlord. When a tenant calls and needs a repair, I mean, you have to get somebody out there. You absolutely do, because as soon as you wait 3-4 days a week,
they can decline paying rent, right?
And they can't technically, but they do. And then they, you go back and forth like, hey, well, this place wasn't working, the way we had signed the lease. And so there is some responsibility, and you do have to take account for that and make sure you're taking care of those items so that the tenant does pay on time. And they know that, hey, even if something comes up, my landlord's going to take care of me. Because going back to when it's a great time to buy, all I have to do is ask the tenants, right? The owner's not there when I show it. The tenants are. So I ask the tenants questions. Like the seller might say, oh, yeah, we're getting $775 in rent. And I go and I say, if you don't mind me asking, tenant, how much are you paying? Oh, $7.25. It's like, well, your owner said you're paying $775. And so it's like, where's the lease? I want to see leases. But those are the things you have to be careful of, because again, not everybody is honest and upfront. And that due diligence side of it is such a huge aspect. And then being willing, I think the final key to real estate investment is being willing to walk away from a deal. That can be really hard, especially if you put money into it, or even just the due diligence phase. Sometimes you try to squeeze a round peg into a square hole, and in real estate investment, it'll come back to bite you. And so I think as much as you got to do your due diligence, understand what you're buying, it's also okay that if something comes up or you don't feel right, that you've positioned yourself to be able to walk away with minimal risk and minimal loss. Because there's nothing worse than getting into a property and now finding out you got a bunch of things to do, and going back fresh to that first initial purchase. Everything we bought 60 to 70 cents on the dollar. And in the last couple years, I've seen investors spending, $105 on a $100 property. And it's like, man, how long? Yeah, and I think that's where just knowing the market, right? Me knowing the market, and I'm looking at what they're buying.
Are they domestic? Are they domestic or foreign?
No. Usually domestic. We do have a lot of foreign buyers. I mean, Erie is a melting pot. We have a lot of immigrants, and a lot of them, are really starting to acquire property, and a lot of them are the ones sitting on cash. And so I think that has also shifted the market, where when you have local people looking at real estate, and this was happening a couple of years ago, and then we have a number of foreign real estate agents, and they tend to work with, their people, if you will. Yeah. And so there are certain aspects where they're like, hey, we have cash, they're sitting on cash. They came over here with cash. They will buy cash. And that started to drive the price up on the local markets, where they're like, where's this money coming from?
You got to go by the sales. Like, you got the sales for the last 6 months. They are what they are. So that's what they're going to appraise by too. So,
right. And that is to your point of the appraisals, like that there again is a way to indicate from the market, because like we have not had issues, even though prices have been going up, our appraisals have been coming in at value. because there was a time, especially right after that recession, where a lot of the sales that were happening were, pretty poor prices for the sales, right, relative to the square footage and the rest of the market, to where when you finally had a buyer say, okay, I'll pay $330 for this, and the bank comes in and says, hey, it's only worth $300. It's like, what? A home is worth what a buyer's willing to pay, unless the bank doesn't agree. And so we tell people, you have to sell this home a couple of times. You have to sell it to the buyer, and then you have to sell it to the bank and make sure it appraises. And so those are things where, again, in a market that's moving so quickly, a lot of these things aren't even a part of it. But as you start to see market shift, you start to see those different aspects come in, whether it's the contingencies or the time on market, the urgency or lack thereof. And so when you're in it all the time, you can see these things. And I think Fresh pointed out before too, if you start to hear from the general public that it's a certain market, you've missed that best time to buy or the best time to sell, because when everybody else figures it out, you're too late.
Yeah,
right.
You got to be up on the trends. You got to know what's on the trends.
Right.
Fresh, real quick. You talk. Go ahead. Steve.
You got a couple questions. Charles has asked several times, what is a short sale? You had mentioned a short sale.
So a short sale is pretty much what it sounds. You're buying. It's like if you similar to like stock, like you're buying it lower than what the market value is.
If I don't want to interrupt you, but technically it's lower value than what they owe. So it doesn't pertain so much. Well, it does pertain to the market, but to Fresh's point, like let's say this home is worth $100,000 in the general market. Well, we go back, they bought it and they finance $110,000, right? And it hasn't had time to appreciate in value. So now they're jammed up, right? They can't afford their mortgage. So they say, hey, I want to sell this. And, Fresh comes in and says, hey, I'll pay you $85,000 because that's all this thing's worth. And they say, well, I owe 110. We bought it, and it's like, well, you overpaid, and in order for me to make it make sense, I got to buy it for 85. So now you have to get confirmation for the seller to say, okay, I'll take it at a loss. But at that point, it's out of their hands. The bank is saying, hey, you owe us 110,000 for this house.
We're going to take this.
Yeah,
and it's like, okay, but go ahead.
So I was going to get to that. So you're buying it short, right? Lower than what the market is. And I was going to say the caveat is when it comes to short sales, especially when the way that we purchase, and I know things change, but in general, as he mentioned, someone has an existing note, sometimes two, right? You might have a second mortgage, right?
First and second, yeah.
And so here's where it's going to get interesting to kind of, for some of the listeners that may not be familiar with it. So if you got a first and second, right? As a short seller, I'm going to basically look to get the home short of what first position is, which is your primary mortgage, your first position mortgage is. And let's just say that mortgage, that's $100,000, right? I look at the value of the house, it's $100,000. And a lot of times when I would buy stuff that like this old, it might be old, it might be beat up. I'm trying to convince the bank that holds the note that, look, this definitely is not worth this $100,000 that's owed on it, right? So it's not worth this $100,000 that's owed on it. So, and a lot of times it is. So we're looking back. We're going to take you back a little bit, Laban, where 2000, between 2006 and 2008, right?
08 was the crash, yeah.
08 was the crash. So during that time, so leading up to 08, these no-doc loans, people just buying stuff off of like just out of paper, out of thin air. Like, hey, I make $500,000, right? When they probably barely made $50,000. Yeah. So now, and then what was happening is you had so many people purchasing homes. So going back to what the appraisal now, and people and the appraisers, when it came to that, they kind of took the blame for it. I think did we freeze up?
I got.
So the appraisers kind of took the blame for it. A lot of it when all of the I would say the appraisers took the brunt of what happened, and unfortunately, because all the appraisers were doing is this is what the comps are, this is what the sales are. People were buying ridiculous amounts, so it wasn't worth it. But the appraisers can only go by, look, these are the top 6 sales. This is what the 6 sales are. They are, 100% over what the value of this is. So that's what it is. So
wow,
to bring it back, that caused the crash, because there's going to be a correction. It was a natural correction, and then it just all hit like boom. It just came
at once,
crashing down. Or everybody was big, and that's why they said a bubble burst. So it was a big bubble. Everybody was getting inflated, and then pop, it blew. So with one of my situations where we ended up getting into a property, we got the property that was, the person purchased the house at $110,000. They purchased at $110,000. I think at the time when I did, and understand, I negotiated directly with the bank. I did directly with the lender. And I think back then, one of the biggest ones was like Countrywide. It might have been Countrywide. I think it was Countrywide.
There's one of them, yeah.
Laban knows, right? So Countrywide probably was the lender. I did a lot of loss mitigation. I can't remember which one it was. Let's just call it Countrywide, right? Because we're familiar with it. Now, we negotiated with Countrywide, and we ended up getting it to, we ended up getting a short sale that, right? The original mortgage was like 110. Let's say they were at 105. We got it for 32, right? So we got it for 32. So when Laban's talking about he got his like 60, he got his 60 on the dollar.
32 cents
like
on a dollar.
28 cents or something like that, right? So we got it 32. So in lieu of that mortgage being the number, right? So they agreed to let us buy this home at 32. Now, there's a balance due. So one of the things that I would do, because I didn't just look out for myself, I would also negotiate that I would request that I forget the term right now, but the balance is forgiven, right? To ask for
it is.
Yeah, the debt is forgiven, because
wow.
Here's what it is, and here's what sometimes where the banks will come in, and Laban will understand this too, and our listeners, for them to know. The banks, they're in it for money, and they're in it for like anybody else's, right? But sometimes these banks do some very unscrupulous things, and one of the things they do is they basically, how you like double jeopardy, but they make money multiple ways off of things, right? And they make money off of our money.
Correct.
And most of the time, so in the real estate game, they sell, for one, they get the note, they buy it at a certain amount, they sell it to someone else. Sometimes a group of investors, they sell it almost all the time. They sell it to somebody else. They just service it. They're just servicing this loan, but it's already sold to a group of somebody else. And Countrywide was one of those groups that was just buying them, right? So now that they own that, what happens is,
and that's legal to do?
Yeah, this is legal.
Wow.
Unfortunately, it's legal because there's a lot of red tape or whatever, But what I'm about to explain is jacked up, but this is what happens. So say that person, once this person goes to a certain amount, this loan is defaulted. Once it's defaulted for that tax year, if you will, they can write that thing off. So it's written off. They wrote off for the 110 loss. They didn't really lose. Like they still made money with the 32 that I got. Yeah. They didn't make as much as they wanted to make. But a lot of times that loan, they sold it. They said, look, the balance, say the balance was 110. They sold that loan for some other. They sold it. The bank got their 110. They sold it to somebody. Now this person, and sometimes it gets sold multiple times. Mm-hmm. And they might have sold it for 10 cents on the dollar. So they made a little money when I bought it. So
that's crazy.
That's how it works. Like it was probably sold multiple times before I got it. For sure it was sold at least once, right? Before I got it, if not twice. And then I got it. And then to speak to just so people know, and then with the short sale, I mentioned the second mortgage. So here's what's the unfortunate part for this second lender. The second position gets wiped out. They get zero. They get donut. So they get nothing. So so the second position is hoping that, they're gonna try. They'll try to say, hey, kind of negotiate with us too, offer us something. I don't have to offer you anything. You got wiped out once I purchased the other one. So just understand that those are different aspects of it. But the short sale is usually that you're getting a piece of property at for less than what the remaining balance on the mortgage was. And it's also below what the market is.
The market, right?
What the market is, and you do that. But usually, when you get short sales that short, it is most of the time there's something wrong with the property, which it was. We had to rehab the space, but it made perfect sense for us because we sold it. That one property we sold that one. That was our first one. Our first one we sold in 21, and let's just say we sold it for over 100, right?
So it's very, very good.
And to your point of that second position, like we had a local resort. It's just over in New York State. It's called the Peak and Peak. And 20 years ago, when I was getting my broker's license, I was in class with a guy who came over from Ohio. He was licensed in Ohio, getting licensed in PA. And we knew a family that owned the Peak and Peak years ago. They owned it for like 30, 40 years. And they had a son and a daughter who were, the next in line, the heirs to this property. And the father has since passed away. He and his brothers owned it together. And so when they sold the property, they sold it to a guy in Ohio. I was taking a class with another broker who represented this buyer for the Peak and Peak. And at the time, the market was solid. The buyer didn't want to leverage everything with banks. And so he had the seller carry a second position note. And I'm talking, this thing sold for like 25 or 30 million. I mean, it was a substantial resort. And the seller held about 8 to 10 million in second position note. First position is the bank for, call it 20 million. And this family, you all right, Fresh?
Yeah, I gotta plug in my charger. I'm good. Go ahead.
So this family said, all right, in order to get this deal done, we'll carry 8 to 10 million in private notes, and he'll pay the bank X amount, and then he'll pay us another. And to Fresh's point, this family never anticipated, because the resort was in great shape. This Ohio buyer had aspirations to do more, to generate revenue, build more condos. Well, then the market crashed. This guy ran out of money from Ohio. The whole resort started to look like trash. It was totally run down. And so he had to sell it short. So he sold it for I honestly, and the family that bought it is a local family. The Scott family have done a great job with it. But I think they bought it for like 11 or 15 million.
Wow.
And my numbers might be off a little bit, but what happened was 50%. To Fresh's point, that $11 million purchase price went to the first position lien holder, which was the bank. And so I had friends of mine who were the heirs to this property originally, that their father carried about 8 to 10 million in a private note, didn't see any of the money, right? So when they took on that risk, like a lot of banks, if this buyer stops paying, we don't see anything. And there's no repercussions. So even when the current owner bought it, he owed nothing to this family because they were in second position, and the property sold for so low, it wasn't even enough to satisfy the first loan, let alone, the second position. And so that's where, and we've talked about shifting from being the buyer or the owner to becoming the lender. And to Fresh's point early on, the Bible says you are a slave to the lender. And again, I mean, that's where so many people have become the bank, and a lot of real estate investors are in such a good equity position that, and I've talked about this with the woman I'm evicting from my Bondi property. Yeah. I've got really good equity. No. But no, and that's the frustrating part, because if she really did want to buy it, like I could carry I could carry more than 20% down. right? Now, a bank's going to want to see skin in the game from the buyer. But my point is that if she puts 80% down, I could carry the other 20%. But I'm now at risk that if she goes, doesn't pay anything, I will never see that 20% that I held as a second position note. So, and that's where the risk of being a banker can be challenging if you're carrying notes, because as that market shifts and now she says, hey, I can't afford this, and the bank to which I took a $180,000 loan and you kept, 40 of it, you're not ever going to see your 40, and the bank's not even going to get their 150. And so now I try to sell it, to somebody else, and it's probably not as in good a condition as when I went to sell it to her. And there's all those ramifications of, it's not like you could have done all the due diligence, but if the client to which you sold it has a bad day or a bad week or a bad month, and you now become the least of their worries, and you got to try to battle it out. So even if you have, the best attorneys to draw up these agreements, if there's no money left over, I mean, you can try to pursue them, but it just will never be fruitful. And so, yeah, you got to be cautious. You have to know the type of market. And to Fresh's point, man, when you can buy things 30 cents on the dollar, you can't go wrong, because I've always said you make your money on the front end, right?
Yes.
And this is where, as this market shifts, the sellers that are able and willing to sell at a 10% discount are going to be moving these properties. And again, part of that is all a perception anyways, right? When somebody says, well, I listed a property at 450 and we've adjusted down to 420, I lost 30 grand. It's like, you never had 30 grand. You never had 450. You know what I mean? So a lot of it is, that's where sales come in and salesmanship, to be able to let these clients reason and understand why it's going to be short or why you just don't have a choice. I mean, Fresh is right on with those different categories of markets and being able to recognize it and then being able to capitalize on it. Because again, like if you're dealing with a bank and they're like, sorry, we're just not able to take it. It doesn't matter how motivated you are. You're not going to get a seller to sell if they really don't want to. Even if they have to technically, because they're running out of money, they will fight and claw until, that last breath, if you will. So you just have to be careful. And I think even in shifting markets, you got to be careful, because there's time where you're like, oh man, I could have bought that. And then the value goes up or whatever. So, and that's where I say, you got to be willing to walk away from a deal, and you can't beat yourself up. It's not win or lose, it's win or learn. And if you're not learning from any loss, that's your own fault. You know what I mean?
Nedvonne, you had two questions. From Peter was the one. If I understood you correctly, you own property in different states.
Yep.
What are the ramifications of that? Do you pay different interest rates in two states? Are you obligated just to pay in the state that you own the property? How does it work if you're an investor and own property in multiple states?
Well, I mean, so the answer is, I think you might mean if you're paying taxes. I think
yes.
The interest rate is going to be what it is from whatever you negotiate when you own properties and other stuff. I think what it boils down to, I'm able to own in other places because of partnerships, man. Because partnerships is where it is. So you have, again, like when I mentioned, I can bring certain things to the table, but I'm like, in your due diligence process, you have to do the due diligence on not only on your deal, on the people you partnering with and their capability, what they're capable of doing, right? So if someone's on the ground, the boots on the ground need to be able to handle certain things. And I think it's a little bit easier, believe it or not, when you get with bigger properties, because like a multifamily, right? We're going to have property management in place. We're going to have, we have online access portals to where like all the partners can see.
Oh, wow.
What's happening. Like, we know what like where, how, how much, how the property is growing. Like when you get that are with partners that are very thorough, in sharing of information and how they do things, and then that's what you do. But you also have to have some ingenuity to yourself and know going in, and again, this is from doing deals in the beginning, and like Laban probably been through this as well. Most investors will go through this. You're going to get burnt. Getting burnt lets you know, like he said, it's not really a loss. That's a lesson. Okay, I'm not doing that again. Okay, right. I know this is the kind of person to not work with. And then most of the time, if you want to follow some simple rules that I would suggest people follow is, like anything else, you do not want to be the smartest person in the room. If you're the smartest person in the room, go to another room. Right now, you outgrown, when you get to that point, you've outgrown that room. Unless you willingly are saying, okay, now I'm the position, I'm the mentor, I'm just trying to help people out. Then that's my giving back. That's my philanthropy or whatever you want to do. But if I'm trying to grow and build, and I'm the smartest person in the room, I'm out of it.
There's something wrong,
out of it, right? So, so that's just kind of where it is. So, to hopefully to answer the question, like you're going to pay taxes, if you will, based off of where the municipality
is. Okay,
right? And more or less also kind of how you're set up business wise to where like your entities. So my entities are set up in certain places where, the places I would recommend everybody set up is 3 places, right? Primarily, you need to set your LLCs up. Initially, it should be Delaware.
Yeah,
I would say Delaware.
There's no taxes. Yep.
And then I would say, I'll give you 4, but Delaware,
Puerto Rico.
Not Puerto Rico. Delaware, Nevada. Some people are doing more. They're doing
Florida. No,
is it Utah?
No, Montana. But my favorite is Wyoming. Wyoming are so yeah. So as an investor, if you Delaware is great because they have their own like litigation court for like if you have discrepancies with things in business. So they deal with it that way. You're kind of covered from that standpoint. All of the states I just mentioned, I believe, have no public disclosure, so it's harder to break the corporate veil.
Oh,
and this is all about protection, right? So you just want to make sure you're protected. So you want to set up, and then you also have to have levels in filtration, right? So you should, and I won't go too much into it, but it should be layered. It should be like companies, and then others. So like holding company. Under this holding company, there's say like LLC. Under that LLC, which is like say your management company, if you will. Management company owns other companies, so you need to have filtration. That's how you should. But when you're in the beginning, it might not be that simple. So it's not that you can't go that deep. So you just get an LLC, a place where there's no public disclosure, and do nothing in your own name. Ideally, you want to control everything and own nothing. That's the goal.
See, and that's the Kiyosaki. That was what Kiyosaki taught me. It's like I don't want to own anything personally in my name.
Well, that's why you have 45 different LLCs.
8. We only have 8. But listen, that a couple of things. Number one, and you like Nedvonne's talking about piercing the corporate veil, and so that's where you have LLCs. And I mean, for ours, a lot, like we don't want to be profitable. We know we want to make money, but as soon as you profit by 100,000, now there's 4 of us partners. Now we're eating 25 grand each, right? Yeah. And so I think that's where, as Fresh is talking about, having the different layers and things. But it is something where you've got to take into consideration the tax implications. And again, the LLCs are something that it can be a nightmare for the accountant. But so much of our different entities are because of different ownership and partnerships. Like, again, my brother Lucas and I are 50-50 in Marsh Brothers LLC. My mom, dad, Levi, and I are Marsh Team Realty and 8840 Peach. We run our property management under our sales division. And so a lot of it is for clarity. But again, like Kiyosaki says, like my vehicles are owned in my companies. I don't own vehicles in my own name. I own the company that owns the vehicle. And so it's the same thing. Like I have the company
tax
pay for the vehicle because if the company paid me a salary and then I paid for the vehicle on my own, they're double dipping on the tax and everything. So it's like you want to try to avoid. And now we didn't have company vehicles until 8 years in business because we didn't have just because it makes sense on paper, you got to have the money in the bank to be able to afford those types of things. And so It's just like, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And so we had to establish the revenue before. And then what happened is the accountant's like, hey, you guys are profitable. You really want to try to reduce your profitability. And one way to do that is to pay for things that you utilize within the company. It makes sense for the company to own it. And it gets it out of your name for liability purposes. And so there's a number of factors as to why, and whether it's a limited partnership. LLC is usually the limited liability corporation. And then you have a C class or an S class. And those are all things you should talk to your accountant about and how you're going to go. And I had mentioned, earlier this year, my wife had established Laban Marsh Enterprises and then Megan Marsh Enterprises, because again, there's
she
so
wanted
many
to go
ways.
National with the mortgage thing, right?
Well, and she is like, she's actually down in New Orleans right now on a speaking engagement. And so she's got a 3-day ultimate mortgage expo where she's setting up a booth as a vendor. And she's also has a chance for a speaking engagement. So, I mean, she is out there crushing it in the mortgage world.
Right.
And then I've always been responsible for handling the real estate investment side of things. And so, and in fact, her mother, I don't know if she watches this, but we've owned an 11 unit with her parents for 12 years now. And so, and they're, getting to the point in life where they got to start figuring things out. And so she's like, hey, can you get me all the docs for the property that we own together? And it's like, well, that was 12 years ago, but I can dig into it and find it for you. But it is one of those things where, again, like one of our entities is 5140 Buffalo LLC. Meg's parents and ourselves are on it. So that's why we have the different LLCs and the different entities. And to Fresh's point, there's investors that say, hey, should I start an LLC? It's like, well, what do you own? Well, nothing yet. It's like, well, you're getting the cart before the horse a little bit.
Right.
And going to that point, like the reason Lucas and I bought a lot of things in our own name early on in the investment stage is that the banks would finance it as a personal loan versus a business loan because we bought it in our own name. And then it got to the point where we transferred those from our personal name into the entities. And sometimes you'll pay transfer tax on that. But for the LLC shelter, it was worth making that move for us. And then, trying to clarify and solidify all the finances, because when we had some in our personal name, you had to file those on the personal entity or on the personal returns. But when you have entities, those entities file separately. And I mean, yeah, the taxes are typically why people invest in real estate. It's one of the biggest benefits to owning real estate investment are the tax advantages. But if you don't know what you're doing, you can get in a lot of trouble. And so make sure you seek, going back to the Proverbs and biblically based, hire advisors that know what they're doing and have some level of accountability to you, to the government, because even when we have the right people, I think my wife, we just got a notice that there were taxes due from the IRS, and it was an oversight from the accountant. And so it'll all work out. But man, you got to cross your T's and dot your I's, because the last thing you want to be behind on a bill is to Uncle Sam. Don't do it.
Fresh, you had a question from an Elizabeth from Raleigh. Hello, Nedvonne. I enjoy your commercials and watching your show. I just purchased a duplex.
Yep.
Is that what it is? Duplex? Okay.
Yep.
I purchased the duplex with 2 other friends. It's our first investment property. And this is something Laban and I talked about yesterday. Do you think we should look into turning it into more of an Airbnb, because Raleigh is a big travel tourist area, or would you suggest making it into a rental property?
So for me, I would say
what's a duplex again?
Duplex is just two. It's two units. 2 units.
Oh, it's 2 units
under one roof.
Oh, okay.
2 units under one roof.
Gotcha.
Okay. So
okay. So you have flexibility there.
Yeah. So I would say, I think
Laban and I were debating about the Airbnb because someone asked about it last week, and Laban said there's new laws going in that restrict it, and it can be tougher to manage.
Yeah. So I would say, for one, you have to understand, for one, your market, right? Let's say little familiar. Raleigh, it hits all of the key points for what you would want to do. I would say short, medium, long stay rentals, right? If you want to do that, right? And I won't just say Airbnb because there's VRBO, there's other.
Oh, there are other entities.
Yeah, there's other places that you can list your things, and then there's other strategies. I like the medium to short stays in terms of not like where someone is staying there for an extended amount of time, but it's not a lease per se. It is
like 3 months.
Yeah, 3 months, 6 months to be a traveling nurse, people relocating,
right. Maybe that's
insurance, people that are displaced by disaster insurance. Like we just had a flood down here.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right? There's a flood, and so some people are going to be displaced. Some people have, they had we just went down. I was just with my father-in-law we went to a lake house, and it was only maybe a few centimeters thick mud, like the water. And this is crazy. The water, the lake rose 16 feet.
Wow.
So the pictures of the boathouse where the boats and jet skis are, you just saw the roof, the top of the roof, the shingles, the top of the roof, and the water was up there. So their stuff was all floating. But so it got down, we went, and it was like thin mud. So he was walking, it was, it was just really, really messy. So you got to know, that was a problem that we had to deal with. And the point is that you're going to have people that have insurance claims, that people like that happen to be our, where, the kind of vacation spot. But there's people who live in places where that was their home. They have mud in their basement. They have different things where they're going to be displaced for 3-6 months at a time, however long it takes for them to mediate.
Clear it out, right.
Mediate those things. And speaking of mediation, I'm going to just plug Lewis Wagner, who's in Dallas. He has a mediation.
Oh, he is? Okay.
Yeah, so he's in Dallas. He does mediation. So he's put me onto this, and this kind of ties back into my FreshFold business. I actually got a client from this whole storm stuff, and got a few. But so I would say I like the short term because you can. I'm not necessarily a big fan. You can still do it. I wouldn't be necessarily a fan of the weekend stays or the 3-day stays, but you can also do things and make it advantageous where you have minimum stays, like 4 days, whatever. So somebody's always paying for a certain amount. But I like traveling nurses. I like disaster relief. I like, insurance stuff. I like those because someone's going to be there for a certain amount of time, and they're usually paying a higher premium.
They're going to pay.
That's when you can get somebody. The insurance company will pay double or triple what your regular rent would be. I like that, right? I like that over some necessarily
like a weekend Airbnb, something like that.
And then,
I was just going to say, for Elizabeth having a duplex, one of the things you can do is have
both, right?
Well, do your upstairs if it's vertical or side by side, but do one long term and solidify that so you've got rent coming in, and then use the other for Airbnb. It's not like you have to use the whole place. Now, my only concern with that would be if you have a long-term tenant, right, that's the in and out, they've got routines, and now you have short-term rental where all of a sudden they have different people in the house every 2 or 3 months or 2 or 3 weeks, and that might be uncomfortable for the long-term tenant where they don't know who's coming in. Because in my experience with duplexes, is
how many bedrooms are a duplex?
They get to know each other. It depends. Like I have a couple 3-bedrooms. I have a 3-bedroom, 1.5 bath duplex. I have a 2-bed, 1-bath. They vary. But my only point is that you want to get camaraderie between your tenants.
The groups,
there's nothing worse than having a good long-term tenant and then you move somebody in and they just fight and bicker and make too much noise. That's where if you have a side-by-side duplex, I have a 3-bed, 1.5 bath Mill Creek duplex where you can hear between the walls, but when they're up and down, like you can hear footsteps and there's different factors. Like when Meg and I bought our first duplex, the first floor tenants were 2 nuns from the Sisters of St. Joseph.
You never heard a thing.
No, the checks in the mail the first of every month from the Sisters of St. Joseph nonprofit. But the nuns downstairs, like, we didn't make much noise walking around or anything as a newlywed couple, but they were great to deal with. Now, they were there after we moved out. And let me tell you, because we had a single female tenant that moved in, and these nuns are like, hey, there are a lot of different guys coming in.
Yeah, they didn't like that.
So, yeah, right. So it's like, hey, I can't tell her not to have guests or whatever else it is. But my point is these were the best tenants ever, these nuns, and I didn't want to jeopardize that with the wrong tenant upstairs. And again, It's like they were in a position where they understood it's out of my control. I need to rent it. But it is something to be cognizant of when you have a multi-unit, especially if it's a duplex where they're pretty tight quarters above or to the side. You do have to be cognizant, because if it's let's say you do the Airbnb and now every weekend they are partying and this person works a night shift. There's just so many factors and I
that go into it.
The communication is key, because if the new upstairs tenant knows, hey, there's two nuns downstairs, they're really great to work with, but just try to be respectful. You know what I mean? Don't play your music too loud after 10, whatever it is. But I know some tenants that, especially if they've lived there a while, and I know, Fresh, you talked about this before, right? With the laundry, like they think because I come in every Tuesday at 4 p.m. that's my washer and dryer, right?
It's mine.
It's the same thing with a rental. Like, you want them to make it and treat it like their own, but at the same time, it's like, hold on, you can't be dictating who I move in here. You know what I mean? But you do have to be cognizant that this could be more work than you anticipated, just from a communication level. And so those are things to be cognizant of. But I would say to Elizabeth in that regard, go ahead, try long-term and try short-term and see which one either profits more or is less headache. Like, what are you investing for? Because I think that's the biggest thing to ask people, because a lot of times it's like, hey, I just want top dollar and I want to make as much money as possible. I don't care if I ruffle feathers. Okay.
So
or
you'd have to rent both.
Do you plan on owning this for 15 to 20 years? You want somebody to take care of the place. They might not pay as high a rent, but they're going to be there for a few years. So there are so many factors to consider, and then being willing to pivot. Like, again, if you go 3 months with the short-term rental people and it's not working out, or somebody's bailing last minute, it might be worth putting in somebody for a long-term. And at the same time, if your long-term tenant is a pain in the neck and they're always complaining, maybe it is easier to just go short-term on both. So if you go ahead.
I would say, so it depends. So this goes back to like what we talked about before. Is like you always go in with the end in mind. So based on their relationship of what's the end goal of this property,
right?
Are we about cash flow? Is this a long-term hold for tax, for different tax income strategies? It depends on what your end goal is. So if their end goal is, look, we just trying to make money, so I would say you could do it with you could do what Laban said, but I think he also put out there, like, here's the possible headaches you could do.
Here's what you could deal with.
When you go in with the end in mind, I also think about this. You got to have like what we call like SOPs. You got to have certain things in place where you got certain operating procedures. You got to have certain standards that this is how, like, I would do a certain tenant profile that I'm looking for. You can market for what you want. If I want like, even with FreshFold, ideally one of my ideal residential client is a family of 4 or more, because I know the kind of clothes that I know what they need, and that's who I market for, right? So they would want to know, okay, if they can market specifically just for, like, remember what I mentioned, they can market to traveling nurses, they can be with relocation companies. That's all they deal with. They're going to keep getting the same type of people who coming in. People who are on corporate assignments, they're going in, they're going to work. They're not partying. They're not doing none of that.
No.
So that's what you're dealing with if you're doing that. Now, if you want long-term people, you get long-term people. But this will all align with whatever your exit strategy is from the jump. Once you know what your exit strategy is, we're trying to maximize profits. We want to hold on to this for 7 years or 5 years, and then we'll reevaluate what we want to do after that. So then once you do that, then that's going to kind of dictate, okay, well, here's the two type of clients, if you will, that fit this profile. Here's the two type of clients that fit this profile. And then you go for them. So I would say, me personally, I would do either or. I wouldn't mix it to the point because of what Laban mentioned. I would not mix it because
strategy,
you don't want I wouldn't mix it with a regular as we in our minds
Long-term.
picture Airbnbs this weekend stuff. I'm not a big fan of the weekends of the weekend 3-4 days.
Right.
I would do, like I said, longer
It's
stays.
short term. Yeah.
The 3 or 4 month people, somebody
I
can
like
live
that.
in there long term and they'll be fine. Okay, they know that this is a corporate tenant. Somebody's in there for 3 months, 2 months, 6 months. They're fine with that, right? That's easier pill to swallow because somebody's just there. They're there for work. They're there for a reason. They're there because of an insurance claim. My home's fixed. Now I'm back out to where I gotta go. I don't necessarily like the revolving door of somebody coming in you don't know, especially if it's like say if it's a single woman that rents there, right? And then it's all kind of guys, and you be surprised, and not you would not be surprised about the type of stories about what happened. Like people rent places to do just to shoot a show. And the show that I'm talking about, a show, if you will, right? Not the kind of show
You're being
where you gotta
diplomatic.
clean your upholsteries and stuff a lot afterwards. So I would caution, just know what you want. For one, have an exit strategy with you and your friends.
The
right?
first one too. Yeah.
So your first one, y'all need to develop. They probably don't. They're just like, we're getting into this. We're gonna make money. We're gonna do that. That's usually how it happens with the first one. So define an exit strategy. Your 3 partners, the other 2 people you're with, you guys should all have roles of what you do. Like run it like a business. It's a business.
It is. It really is.
You're in charge of property management. You're in charge of. Are you going to do from a management standpoint? You're going to do. This person. You're in charge of acquiring tenants. Whatever. You're in charge of the maintenance, upkeep, whatever it is. You guys figure out all of the things that you need to do with this property. And then divvy it up, right? It's going to be like 15, 20 things. Divvy it up. So you're running it like a business. And you need to have that in mind. Once they do that, I think they'll be fine. And this brings me to one other thing. I know, Laban, wanted to talk about this earlier. Because we're talking about with our properties. What do you do on the front end when it comes to investment properties? What do you do on front end and overall for like maintenance and work and repairs? Like in terms of set aside, like the front, like I know what I do.
Is that Marcus that does it for you?
Yeah, so I have a full-time property manager, but it sounds like what you're talking about as far as budgeting. Like, do you budget X amount?
Yeah, you budget amount for like I know in the front end, like I would go, hey, front end just in case.
A little heavier.
Something that can happen. All right, we're gonna have let's just say I'm in a product, like, all right, we need $5,000 set aside just in case something boiler goes, boom. Right? I need that, right? So I need to make sure that's good. Then from there, let's just say I might have 10% goes towards the maintenance and repair fund. That's just in this account that goes there, sits there all the time. What do you do? I do some, that's along the lines of what I would do.
Yeah, see, that's a great question. And honestly, because when we first got started, we were highly leveraged, meaning I wanted OPM. I wanted to use other people's money, whether it was the bank, if it was the seller carrying a note, whatever it was. And it also helps your ROI. Like if I have very little invested out of my pocket, the ROI grows exponentially. It's
huge,
right? Yeah. And so in that regard, so much of our properties, number one, when we bought it, we usually bought it from underperforming owners, right? And so immediately we come in and start increasing the revenue, and be that we didn't have a whole lot of money down. Like when we were buying, the bank let us put 10% down versus the 20 to 25% I need now. So we didn't have to put a whole lot down. And then instead of saying, hey, let's hold $5,000 here for repairs, we were in such a good position and it was cash flowing so well. We knew what we bought. We, personally inspected it, didn't necessarily need to hire an inspector, but I looked at my partners, right? Like my brother Lucas, I knew he was in a position where a couple winters ago, one of our places had a foundation issue with the wall. Right before Christmas, it was like a $9,500 repair, right? And we didn't have that money set aside in the entity, but I knew my partner and Lucas, and I'm like, hey, dude, we both need to put $5,000 into this account to make sure we can take care of the repair. And then, our accountant just puts it as a capital improvement. And then what happened is we ended up selling a different place a couple months later, and we just reimbursed ourselves. So as far as budgeting for certain repairs, and you can do that, especially if you know the home pretty well. But I have not really had to budget for repairs because as soon as something comes up, we take care of it. And it's typically a $150 toilet repair or a window replacement for a few $100. Thankfully, knock on wood, it's never been, hey, this is a break the bank sort of issue. And going back to your point of why I like partners, okay, it might reduce my profitability, but it also reduces my risk. And so if I had to eat a $10,000 repair on my own, my wife's going to look at me funny. But if she understands that, hey, it's between Lucas and I, so we both put it in, we'll get it back out, but it's just an unexpected repair that we had to incur. Now, I also have a property management account, right? And so for the properties that we own together, I can have my property management account cover those expenses. And so I think that's where, as an investor, like, it's a great question, but it's like, well, first I dig into the entities, cash flow, right? And if there's not enough cash flow there, I go to the partners. And if the partners aren't there, I can borrow it, from someplace else. So I think having those outlets and knowing if something comes up where you're going to go to, it just depends on how you manage and run your business. So I try to run, the business as thin as possible, but sit on, cash in the back in case I need it. But so many of our places, thankfully, cash flow well enough that we do have enough money sitting in that entity's account to where if something comes up, I don't panic. And I also ran into this with one of my second property manager, just didn't have a lot. He didn't own a home. He didn't have a lot of experience with this. And so he would call me and say, hey, we just got an invoice for $3,000. What do you want me to do? I'm like, well, I'd like you to pay it. Like, what, whatever the repair was necessary for $3,000, we got to take care of it. But because that was such a large sum of money to him, like, he wasn't sure what to do. And so I think that's where the more seasoned of an investor you become, the more comfortable you become with some uncomfortable situations. And then you have to look at it and just say, okay, like Lucas and I, for the investments we've rarely had to invest any of the working capital back into properties. So when that happens to come up 10 years after owning someplace, again, we had enough money in that entity where it depends on how you run it. Like, we never took any excess or profits out of our rentals and put them to our personal accounts. We'd always just let it sit in the bank. Now, if it got sizable, we'd look to acquire something, right? So it just depends on how comfortable you are running it, but you definitely want to have a game plan for a large repair. And that's where I'm in a partnership with, people who I know, if need be in an emergency situation, they can dig in to their pocket and come up with it, versus either over leveraging it, put it on a credit card, whatever some people to do to, get through that hump. But again, I think there's 100 ways to skin a cat, and whatever makes you most comfortable, and this tends to be different for men and women. Like, women want to have a bunch of money and save, and there's men too, but it's like, I'm less risk averse to where it's like, hey, if we're a little thin, we'll come up with it. Whereas there's other people who would rather sit on 20, 30 grand in the bank in case anything comes up. And it's like, well, that's just sitting there earning very little. I'd rather be putting that into place, earning higher returns, but it's where you're comfortable with. So, that's where those big repairs, and again, depending on what type of building do you own, like that 11 unit, I had a sinkhole in the front yard of my duplex. It's 3 separate buildings, a single family, a 7-unit duplex, and then a garage. And it's like, I looked down in the hole, there was a gas line running through it, and ended up being an old water well. We had no idea. So I had an excavator out there, and he had to bring in tons of gravel, and it ended up being a $2,500 repair. But when I saw it, I'm like, oh, this could be $7,000 to $8,000. So I think those are the things that, and it came out of nowhere just from the winter. We'd owned it 11 or 12 years, and finally we see a sinkhole. I never could have predicted that, right? So there are some things that for some investors, you have a big $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 repair, it can cripple them. So you got to know who you're investing with. You have to know where you're going to get the resources in an emergency situation if you don't have it within that entity or in the stockpile. So it's a great question as far as budgeting for repairs. And even when you go to sell something, you can do like an annual property operating data sheet. And it's like, well, for a few years, I've put less than $500 into each of these places. You know, maybe it's my HVAC getting cleaned out every spring and fall. You know, there's some ancillary costs that kind of go with maintaining a home. But for the most part, I don't often budget for major repairs because I've already done my due diligence when we acquired it. And as soon as we acquire it, we try to do those things. Like that's the point. If you need 20 grand to close and it needs 10 grand of repairs, I'm going into this expecting to spend 30 grand on the acquisition and to improve it so that I don't have issues in the near or long term, at least for a while.
Yeah.
So the last question, because I know Fresh has to run.
Yeah, I got
this this comes from Christine. She says, Nedvonne, you and Laban, do you guys have a consulting service? You should start one. I have a room that I need to rent out. I'm separated recently from my husband and I need the money. I just watched Netflix's Worst Roommate Ever and I'm scared of renting my room out, but I need the cash. Are there any rules and regulations, anything that you can set when renting just a single room out as opposed to an apartment? I guess she has concerns because I watch Worst Roommate Ever too, and she wants to rent a room out.
SROs, right? So, right, SROs are they're interesting. They're tricky. I would think you have to you really that's something that it could be tough. I mean, you want the money, right? You want the money. I would say you can do that. But
she's seen people who just stop paying and you can't get them out.
Again, so there's a number. So I would say this, right? What's the woman's name again?
Christine.
I would
and
tell
she's
Christine
from North Carolina too.
I would say this to Christine. First thing I would do is identify how much money Christine needs to, like, what she feels she needs to
for the room.
Right. Let's just say that's $500 a month.
Right.
And I would tell Christine to she could chat GPT comprise a list of different things that she could do to supplement to that she could probably do from home or wherever that can get that type of money to where it's less, it could tend to be less of a headache. Right. If she feels that like that's just the way I want to go, then she could just go that way. But I just think that there are so many other ways that whatever that number is,
right,
supplement the money because it's a whole different
ball game when you rent out one room, right?
Well, but to protect herself, she can run their credit, run their criminal background check,
you can
things
do all
like that.
Yep.
But that doesn't change. Listen, I tell people all the time, you can do that, but then a month in, life happens to them.
They stop paying.
They flip the switch.
Isn't it tougher to get them out?
I was just going to say, it's a lot more difficult to get somebody out than it is to get them in.
And then you got professional tennis. Look, you got professional tennis who know the game. They know the game.
Yeah, they know the laws.
Yep.
They're professional squatters.
So my recommendation is to do something else, right? don't try not to rent the room.
Don't go to that
unless you have to. Unless you really feel you have to. Explore other options is my suggestion. Explore the options.
Or do you rent your entire space out for more of a profit and then find something smaller for yourself? Like, I think that's the one thing. I know of people that have rented their house out because rent's so high, and then they go find a little apartment to live in.
Well, I know they've done that. Yes.
So, I mean, it's not like, again, if you're concerned about a roommate, just rent the whole thing out for top dollar and then take whatever's left and go find something smaller for yourself. So, I mean, I'm with Fresh though. I mean, that is, man, a roommate. I know some people that do house or whole house rentals where they call them boarding houses usually, where they rent a room, there's a lock on the door. But I also know, like, even Razul, like, he's got 4 guys in the same room.
He does. Yes.
So I mean, that can be
uncomfortable,
problematic.
It's set up for that, opposed to you being in your space because you don't know what you're going to get, right?
Correct.
So I would just say,
even screening them, again, people change, man.
Explore the other options first. Explore the other options first.
I mean,
you got to do it.
There are so many ways to hustle, though. Like, I go out to dinner. How many times is there just not a tenacious wait staff that wants to make good tips by providing good service? So, to your point, or delivering pizzas or delivering FreshFold Laundry, whatever it is, like, there are so many ways to generate revenue where you don't have to jeopardize your housing situation or your livelihood for that. So I'm with Fresh. Find another form of revenue generation, and you'd be amazed how quickly that's where you go back to Dave Ramsey, right? And you just trim all the fat as far as your expenses, looking at your budget. Where is your revenue? Where can you find additional revenue? We talk about streams of revenue all the time, and for us as investors, it's usually through different assets. But when you're just grinding and getting started, man, work 2 or 3 jobs and don't be ashamed of it. You know what I mean? Like, do things that you can earn above and beyond because you are so hungry. You got to eat. So
good,
really good advice. So Fresh,
you are amazing, man. Thank you. And I will say, FreshFold Laundry Company, just outside of Chapel Hill, North Carolina. They now have a pickup service. You schedule online, they pick up your clothes, wash, dry, fold them at Land Speed Records. You come and get them. They have an online subscription model, weekly or bi-weekly. They have deals for college students. They have so many services. Check out their website at freshfold-laundry.com. And Fresh, the last question we had is, what is the pickup radius that you guys use mileage-wise if someone wants to?
About 20 miles. So we go about
20 miles. Holy crap. Okay. All right. I got to put that on there too. Okay. All right, man. That was perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Take care.
Good seeing you, man. Come on, get out of here. I'm kidding. Hey, and I'm sorry I was late. I told Steve I thought it was 11, and then we lost. No, it was all good, dude. You know me. I'm pretty agile, but
I don't know why I thought it was 10 o'clock. I'm sorry.
That's all right. Well, and I had to go back and check my text message. I'm like, bro, maybe he's Central Standard or Mountain Time. I don't know. Maybe you were traveling, dude.
I wasn't. No,
well, I appreciate you getting me on, dude. We leave.
No, he's great. He's
awesome. Well, and he's super knowledgeable. I love that we're in different areas of the country, so you have a different perspective in that regard. But we leave early tomorrow morning for Virginia.
Virginia, right? You're going to Richmond for the tournament.
Yeah, another Puma circuit. So that should be fun. And but always great to get with you, man.
The 4th, okay?
Yeah, it was great. I mean, it was pretty relaxing. Drew, I helped Lucas fire off the fireworks, so I was one of the pyrotechnics. Which I was wearing a shirt earlier. We get our fireworks from Flagship Fireworks. A couple of our buddies own it, and he has a great T-shirt. It says Flagship Fireworks on the front, and on the back it says Firework Technician. If I run, you run. It's a great one of my best T-shirts. But yeah, it was fun. I hope everybody had fun. I know some of the puppies don't like all the noise. Even our cats were a little skittish when they were hearing the bangs and pops. But no, it's always fun, dude. 249 years of a birthday to celebrate. You know what I mean? For America. So next year is 250 years.
Trump's doing the UFC show at his place.
Well, and it was scary. I saw a couple shows interview young people on a beach about, hey, the 4th of July is America's birthday. How old? And some girl said 50 years old. It's like,
well, that's not surprising.
Bro, hey, listen, come on, dude. 50 years old. I'm 46. How you think America's 50 years old? I don't care if you're 20. You better.
They're dumb. But your reels have done great, which is awesome.
Those are fun.
When I post your reels on TikTok, you had one with almost 300 views, which is huge. If you get 100 views, that's considered good.
We'll take it.
And yours all did good there, and they did very well on Instagram.
Nice.
So you're just killing it. I can't wait to cut this up.
Dude, that was good. I mean, that was
you and Fresh should start a consulting.
Yeah, that's great. I tell you, that's what a lot of investors start to do that after they get the experience. But then whether they charge for consulting, and it's like it's really hard. No, they don't. But it is still. I mean, there are some general principles of investment that almost anybody could teach you. But so much of like that was great for her being from Raleigh. Like that's where you need
blew my mind.
Yeah, but I mean, you need somebody more local to understand
the lay of the land.
Yeah, because again, what works in Erie might not work in Raleigh. Because I know Erie is a unique market that we can get away with some things that other markets just can't. And so I think that's where it's important to find somebody local. And there's definitely a bunch of national investors that could consult and give you some good principles to follow. And I think that's what Fresh and I are definitely doing. But when it gets down to more specific questions, you need a local investor, a local agent that really knows, because how quickly things can change too.
But is that something that like you guys have ever thought about? Have you ever thought about buying property in Florida or the Carolinas or Georgia? Like he does, like in New York and Connecticut and Carolina, because I know it's different.
Yeah, I personally have not, because I want to be able to get to the front stoop and see the tenants. Like
stay at your home.
But I think even to Fresh's point, like it's all about having the right partners. Like I've got my business coaches in Charleston, South Carolina.
Trevor's the man.
Yeah. Oh, he's great. Trevor Crennell. He is one of the best coaches all around.
The low coach of the low bro.
Low country. Yeah, South Carolina. But there's another guy in our coaching group. We actually have a call Friday, although he just had a baby daughter, so we might have to reschedule it. But this guy, Evan, is a great investor. He's got a twin brother. They buy apartment complexes, not just in the Charleston area, but he owns in North Carolina. He just bought one in Georgia. And so as long as you have a body there, it makes a lot more sense.
You need a body there. I see.
Yeah, I wouldn't buy something that I can't drive by on the regular. I can't see how it's going. I don't know the market as well. And there's some people that do.
There's a lot of people that do. Yeah.
But for me personally, I've stuck to things, pretty local. I can get to everything I own. And you got a good see a tenant face to face. Yeah, I mean, right. Oh, having Marcus is clutch. So
the lady, she still didn't leave after the 5-day eviction notice?
No, she's not out yet. So I don't know.
Not out yet.
Because going back to Fresh's point. Well, these are professional tenants, right? Professional
tenants. Know the rules. Yeah,
they know the rules, and
I don't call them professional tenants; they're professional squatters.
Well, yeah, but and again, they signed the lease. It's like I can but we gave her over a year to try
to buy the place.
So I don't feel bad, but I do realize I now have a bit of a fight on my hands, because again, it's a balancing act where
How is that a fight though? Hey, don't you just call the constable and they evict her?
Yeah, well, but there's that. So once you post a 5-day notice, if they don't get out, then you have to file with the court again, and then that's when it goes to the constable. So and then there's fees with that too, which is minimal, a couple $100. And again, it's like, well, you're getting rent. Why do you want to get? And it's like, well, because I have a bunch of equity and I want to sell it. And the best time to sell.
It's just dragging it out.
Yeah. I mean, it's inevitable. And unfortunately, she's put a bad taste in my mouth to where
in the past, because she lied to you.
Right. So I might work with them or say, hey, I've got another place that I could rent to you.
I'll move you right over there.
Yeah. Right. And those are things where it goes back to what Fred said.
That.
Oh, yeah. But they start to think, well, this is my home. I've lived here for 3. It's like, oh, man, no, this is my home. You signed a lease on paragraph 21.
And you're not buying it.
Right. Exactly. And that was the thing. Like, and I told her that. It's like, hey, if you're not, I'd love for you to buy it. It's easier for me than put it on the market. And when they say they're going to.
Do you think that she just couldn't get the financing for it?
It's hard to tell. I know she's got a lot of family things. There was more than one generation in the house, which is true. That's happening more and more. And so I'm sure she has a legitimate reason. And maybe she thought I was just going to kick her out. But it was like, I've given her more than ample time.
Oh, I know. A freaking year.
when I went to lunch with Marcus, he's like, yeah, I have the 5-day. I'm going to post it. So that was about a week ago. I'll double check. I'll drive by again to see if things are still there.
Was it ever close to her buying it? Was
No,
it ever
I mean,
I went to the bank and
well, it was hearsay. She said she went to the bank. So it's like, okay, can you send us a pre-approval
I'm just waiting to hear back. I'm just waiting to hear back.
Yeah, the pre-approval letter. Right.
Oh,
and a lot of times with
so
busy investors, they forget about it. And then it gets to the
and
point
you
where
don't get around to it, right?
No, and then what happens is it's October, right? And it's about to start snowing. So it's like, well, I don't want you to move out now. And then I have trouble finding a tenant in December before Christmas or the holidays.
So you can stay.
Yeah, and that's where, again, understanding your portfolio, knowing your numbers, knowing what your debt service is, what your rent and rent potential is, because when we take this off the market, like right now, she's paying me $1,600 a month, which goes to pay down my debt service. She
doesn't miss the payment or anything.
Nope.
It's just she got to go.
She's got to go, and that's why I sign leases, because it protects both the tenant and the landlord, as opposed to just a handshake.
Is the lease year to year typically?
So we usually sign them. Yep, we do a year's lease, or like I've done with them, I did a
3 years
with a tier. But all you have to provide is an extension. So Marcus will fill out a 1-page extension every year, because as soon as once you get beyond the lease, if a tenant started on a lease and now they're there, you say you did a 3-year lease and they're at year 5 and you never renew their lease, it reverts to landlord-tenant law of Pennsylvania. And that is more favorable to the tenant than it is to the landlord.
Of course.
And so you want to try to abide by the lease, which, again, like one of the things that I never had, and you would not be happy about this, but like we never had in there that you can't smoke in the unit. It wasn't written notice.
Well, I would never smoke in the unit anyway. But.
And most people wouldn't. But then when you don't have it on the lease and we walk in and it smells like smoke in there, which is really hard to get rid of. It's like we went to evict somebody because they were smoking in the unit, and we found out there was nowhere in the lease that said you're not allowed to smoke. So we had to add that to all of our leases. And now you get into medical marijuana, and somebody can be licensed. So they're vaping and whatever it is. I mean, even if it's the straight grass, I mean, that smells even worse, which is more potent to not only the house, but to the neighbors. I can't, if it's a medical thing, there's nothing I can do about it. So and this happens with duplexes, right? With duplexes, it's the same thing.
So that's what you were saying, that
you have a good long-term tenant, and now you get somebody that moves in short-term and they have different behaviors. You might lose your long-term tenant because of what, the new tenant is legally allowed to do. So there are other complications to the whole landlord side of things. But the biggest thing is communication, and then holding people to that accountability, primarily based on a lease. So, yeah, dude, we're creeping towards that two-hour limit, man.
No, I know, because he was on early. So just so I know, how long can this girl stay?
I should be able to have her out within 30 days.
So it can be another 30 days, even though you served the 5-day.
Yeah, 5-day notice. Then you got to go to court and say they didn't get out in the 5 days.
So now it's 30 days, or they're going to get thrown out.
And a lot of times it's like most of the time you take somebody to court is because they haven't paid rent. Well, we take people to court just to get out. Like, yes, they've paid up. I don't need any more rent from them. I just need them out.
And does that change how the court looks at it, or no?
No, because as long as you have a lease and the lease states, hey, you followed the lease terms, then you're doing it by the book, which is the right way to do it, which is why we try to go about it the right way and get the cooperation. But as soon as you get pushback, the biggest fear becomes, oh, great, they're probably not going to move quietly. They probably, if they've got pictures on the wall, they're going to tear them out and make it, I got to paint it all. Yeah. So that's that balancing act. And again, I mean, where I thought I could sell it as is, I might now have to put $5,000, $10,000, $15,000. And that's just to get it ready to sell. Or let's say the market shifts and now it isn't selling for what I want. Well, now I put a tenant back in there, right? And so even putting a tenant back in there, a lot of times you have to fix it up. There's that turnover of either paint or cleaning carpet.
She just caused a big mess by doing that.
Yeah, and again, I could take the blame myself had I not giving her ample.
No, I mean, you want to believe people. That's the thing. You want to believe people. You want to tell. I'll tell you a quick story because my friend wanted me to tell you this from last night's show. He had somebody apply for a job. His name is Frank. He owns a pizzeria here.
Oh, yeah.
She came, she interviewed, she got the job. He's like, well, okay, you can start on Monday. She doesn't show up on Monday. She used the paperwork, that she contacted him for the job and interviewed just so she could continue collecting unemployment.
Yep, that's the game they're playing now.
It's the craziest thing I have ever heard in my life. She got the job.
Yeah.
And she just used it because she didn't want to work.
Nope. And that is where, again, not to get too political, but I mean, that is where, when you're talking about support, whether it's Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, whatever it is, and we've seen this with SSI. I mean, tenants come in and they'll have 7 kids, and it's like, they're getting paid on each of these kids, and they're not putting it back into the kid. I mean, there are people that literally know the system.
Inside and out.
Yeah, and you got to be careful. And then a lot of times in the screening process, they'll ask questions that most people don't even know to ask. And so
he doesn't have time to, he doesn't do background checks. He doesn't have time to do the screening process.
Well,
because he thinks it's bullshit. And then he says, even if he has a bad employee, he doesn't want to ruin their life and say that they were a horrible employee.
Oh, well,
he's all right. He came, he was on time. And
it's just he should get references, right? Like when we get tenants, we get references, and Marcus calls them.
He won't do that.
The previous tenant. I mean, we've called certain landlords, and they're like, "Oh, that was a great tenant, but they just needed more space. You should have, they always paid on time. Great." Then you call somebody like, "Oh, you got them? Yeah, oh man, I steer clear after 2 months. You're never going to see." So I think it is important to get references, and and listen. Then you're talking to them and say, "Hey, I called X, Y, and Z," or
and this is the report.
Yeah, great. And if anybody's good and upfront, they'll be like, "Yeah, go ahead, call them. They'll tell you how I was." So it is important, and that goes back to due diligence. You know what I mean?
Yep, no, it does.
And I've always said to people, hey, if you don't have the time or money to do it right the first time, how are you going to have time or money to do it again?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's so I can't remember if it was Kiyosaki or one of the guys from Shark Tank, but it's like hire slow and fire fast.
Absolutely.
I mean? It's imperative.
100%.
Well, hey, brother, always great to be with you. Another excellent episode.
Great job. Yes.
I appreciate you doing it, man. Sorry about the miscommunication.
No, it was my fault. It was my fault. I don't know why I thought I had in my head 10. It's fine.
That's all right. That's where I got everything goes into my calendar. Otherwise, yeah,
I know. Me too. I got to start doing that.
Yeah.
All right. And James Whitfield was on, which was good.
That's cool.
He likes watching the shows, so
nice.
He's getting into it. So have a safe trip. When are you going to be back?
So we get back Sunday night. He plays
perfect. Okay.
He plays 1 game Thursday, 1 game Friday, 1 game Saturday, and 1 game Sunday.
All right, and then you're out of there. Okay.
Yeah, so he'll get ample rest. But yeah, we'll be back Sunday night and ready for the following week. But yeah, man, I appreciate it. And I'll be back next week. We can do this again. Whether we can get fresh or whatnot. But yeah, always good conversation, always great questions. I appreciate your listeners. And
they're your listeners and Fresh's listeners. Fresh had a lot of questions.
Very engaging. Yeah, it's great. All good stuff, brother. Well, keep doing what you're doing, man. The cohesion. The cohesion.
We're working on it. All right. Well, I named FreshFold Laundry Co. So we're good to go. For Laban Marsh, the king of real estate in Erie, Pennsylvania, Marsh and Marsh Real Estate. I'm Steve Cully, the best podcast host in the universe. Remember, when life gives you lemons, don't make lemonade. Take 2 oranges and throw them back at Chapel Hill.